Welcome back to my channel. My name is Lexi Jong, and here I'd like to talk about luxury makeup. Today we are taking a closer look at the new Pat McGrath Sublime Skin Highlight. And this, I have a video up already with the first time I used it and a lot of swatch comparisons and everything as well. So today what we're going to be doing is actually comparing it to the Guerlain Meteorites Pearl Dust palette, because the finish between the two of these is fairly similar. So I had a lot of questions about how these compare, and I do have swatch comparisons of these. The colors are not alike. However, the finish is pretty similar. So we can kind of take a look at that, and I have a wear test as well as a couple of different application methods as well. One of the things though that I wanted to swatch real quickly, this is the new Les Chaînes de Chanel. This is the illuminating blush that is part of the holiday collection for Chanel. And this is what it looks like. And I wanted to compare it to the Pat McGrath because although the colors are not quite the same, you see, it's definitely bronzier in the Chanel. There is a little bit of similarity. You can kind of see that, kind of where the light hits a certain way, you get a little bit of that bronzy look from the Pat McGrath. So it just kind of made me think of this a little bit. Now I'm gonna go ahead and swatch these. I'm gonna go from the pearly gold, pearly amber to pearly pink, and then I'll have a swatch with all three mixed together, which is how I wore it in the clip. So here are the three separate. And you can see that the colors, none of the colors are really very similar. Here it is all mixed together. Now, as I mentioned in my other video on this highlight, the Pat McGrath highlighter, its swatches, very dark. It can look a little scary because it does look so dark, so it can be a little scary for people with lighter skin tones. However, when you put this on, it goes on very subtly. And unless you really build it up and like buff it into your skin, you're not going to see a ton of that color. You'll see like a hint of it, but it will not be this dark. So if you're fairer than I am, this may be a little bit too dark for you. And, I think otherwise though, I think my skin tone, it works, but if I go in very heavy with it, it looks a little bit too deep. So I think if you're lighter than me, you may not like it, but my skin tone and above, I think it works pretty well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first clip. Today, we are going to be doing a comparison between the new Pat McGrath Sublime Skin Highlighter and the Guerlain Meteorites Pearl Dust palette. And this is my favorite highlighting palette. This currently reigns supreme. And I found that the finish between the Pat McGrath and the Guerlain, to me, they seemed like they're pretty similar. So we're gonna do a side-by-side comparison so we can really tell, and we'll do a wear test with this to see if they hold up as well. Now the colors are not the same, but I think we can check more for the effect that you get on your skin. We're gonna use the Sonia G Mini Cheek, and on my right side, we're using the Pat McGrath. And here is, you can see the product on the brush. I did tap it off once. And you can see that it really goes on pretty subtly. Considering it's Pat McGrath, I expected it to be really blinding. I personally like how subtle it is. I wiped the brush off, and now we're gonna go into a mix of all three of these shades here. You can see got more product on the brush. So let's compare both sides here. So here are the two sides from a distance. So this is the Pat McGrath. And here's the Guerlain. And although the colors aren't the same, It's probably the most similar combination I can get from the Guerlain with the Pat McGrath. And I think the actual finish of the two of them on my skin is fairly similar. Let me go ahead and swatch these for you. So here we have the mix from Guerlain. So I put all 3 shades here, and then this is the Pat McGrath. And again, the Pat McGrath really does go on a lot lighter on the skin than it appears in the swatch, but you can really kind of pick up on some of the undertones and so forth. Finish-wise, I feel like they really do have a pretty similar effect on the skin. It's more about the different shade. And if you look at the Pat McGrath, it's really like a rosy champagne shade, and it looks super dark in the swatch, but it really does kind of, here, let me buff this out a little. We're gonna buff some out here. So you can kind of see. So this is the Pat McGrath. And just the shade in general is kind of like a dusty rose mixed with champagne. And it is a bit deeper, but I feel like on my skin, it doesn't look too deep. Normally, one of the things I like to do after applying highlight is I like to kind of have a little bit more of a transition. So I'll take a blush brush or like a buffing brush and just kind of smooth this area between the highlight and the blush. Today, I'm going to leave it as it is so we can really kind of see how well it wears and stays where I put it. It has been 8 hours since I applied the highlights, and I have, you know, touched my face and stuff a bit today, but it looks like nothing's really rubbed off. And this is the side with the Guerlain, and this is the side with the Pat McGrath. And I did put both of them on a little heavier than I normally would, so you can really see it. Let's move in a little closer. Here is Guerlain. And here is Pat McGrath. It has been 13.5 hours since I applied my makeup, and it's way past my bedtime. Now, this is the side with the Guerlain. Here it is with the Pat McGrath. And I'm gonna move you in closer. This is the side with the Guerlain. And this is the side with the Pat McGrath. And my cheeks are a little flushed right now. I'm a little warm. I switched into a sweatshirt and then I got a little bit too warm. Now, this is it for the wear test. I hope that was helpful so you can see how well it actually lasts throughout the day. I was really impressed with the staying power of both of them. Now, the Guerlain Meteorites Pearl Dust palette is my favorite highlighter. It has been #1 since it was released this year, and everything that I purchase, you know, so far I haven't found anything to come close to this. This has been my favorite by far. And I think both of them wore very well. So I already knew that the Pearl Dust was going to wear well because, you know, obviously I wear this one quite a bit, but I was very happy to see that the Pat McGrath highlighter really held up to it. And I do think that the finish on the skin has a very similar quality to it, but again, the colors are different. After I finished the wear test, before I took my makeup off, I decided to really kind of build up the highlights and see how bright and how blinding I could get them to be. So let's take a quick look at that. I am taking the Levres 17 brush. This is actually a foundation brush, but it's a great little buffing brush as well. We're going to start off with the Guerlain. So I'm just stamping all around. We've got plenty of pigment. Knock off anything extra. And let's just see how this goes. So there's the Guerlain. You can see that it gets very bright, but yet it still blends in nicely with the skin. Now let's move ahead and do the Pat McGrath. Using the same brush, I wiped it off. We're gonna go into this and we'll do swirling. I think that's gonna work a little bit better. Do a little tapping too, just be on the safe side. But because of the raised surface, I think swirling will get a little bit more pigment at this point. All right, so there's the Pat McGrath, and you can see when you put this on heavier, you can definitely see a lot of the pigment. If I were to wear this shade, you know, I could wear this underneath like a light blush for an illuminating blush, or I could probably even just wear it as a blush, but it's a little bit too deep for me in this particular way. So building the highlight up this much definitely makes it a little blingier. I still think the Guerlain though, it's a little bit brighter than the Pat McGrath. And again, some of that might have to do with the deepness of the Pat McGrath shade. But I think Guerlain's a little bit brighter and blingier in general. I have to say that it doesn't really become a super blinding highlight at all. So I kind of expected it to be a little bit more, just a little bit brighter and more glowy than it is, since it's from Pat McGrath, who I always associate sparkle with. But I personally really like the level of glow that I get from this highlight. So if you're looking for something more subtle, but still very, very luminous, this is it. You can also build it up to be, you know, kind of like a medium brightness highlight. But if you're looking for full brightness, full highlight, this doesn't really go to that level in my opinion. And finally, I have one more clip showing you how I applied it today. I actually used it as a base for underneath my blush. So I put it on first, and I put it on pretty darkly so you can see the actual color of the swatch here as well. It doesn't get this dark, but you can see the color on my skin. And if I wear it that deeply, it is a little bit too dark on its own. However, this highlight, you could technically get away with using it as a blush. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to compare it with the illuminating blush from Chanel, because you could technically wear them in similar fashions. So let's take a look at that clip and then meet me back here for some further thoughts. We're gonna go in with the Pat McGrath highlight and the SUQQU Z2. And I am just swirling the brush on here. And you can see the sparkles on the brush, so you know that it's on there, but it goes on fairly lightly with this brush. Look at that. So I'm going to actually put this all over my cheek with a more dense brush, and we're going to see how it plays underneath some blush as well. I'm going to take the Levres 24 brush, just getting a little bit of this on here. Okay, you can see my whole cheek is nice and shiny. So this is the highlight alone, and let's pair a blush on top of this. I'm going to take the Chantecaille, this is the Philanthropy Cheek shade in Grace, which has the sea turtle on it, and we have the SUQQU KZ04, and let's go ahead and see how this... All right, so you can definitely see the gold from the highlight peeking through. A little bit of rose gold. I think it pairs very nicely with this particular shade. So there's the highlight underneath, and I think it works really well underneath the blush. It's a little bit deep. You can see it gets a little bit dark in spots, so let's see if we can buff that a little bit more. I just wiped the Rapper 24 brush on a microfiber cloth to kind of remove any pigment. We're just gonna kind of buff these together. There it is, buffed a little bit. It's a little bit lighter than this side now. So there it is. Now for me personally, I think I prefer to use it more as a subtle highlight versus underneath the cheek, just because it is a little bit deep, but I can go in with a lighter touch with the highlight as well on the cheek. And you know, without a brush like this, something a little bit fluffier like a blush brush or the SUQQU Z2 I used for the highlight, and then that makes a lovely accent. I'm taking the SUQQU Z2 and I'm just gonna add a little bit right here of just the highlight, right on top. And I'm gonna just go a little bit on the rest of my face. And there we go. That's the highlight. I hope these clips have been helpful to kind of help you make up your mind about whether or not you want to purchase this highlighter. It is currently an exclusive to Pat McGrath's website. I don't know if that will change in the future, but I wouldn't expect it to change anytime soon, because this is the same thing that she did last year when she released the Astral Quads, the Blitz Astral Quads. The one was exclusive to her website, and one of the quads this year is as well, and so is this highlighter. And I don't remember if the third quad was eventually released to Sephora, but I know it definitely wasn't released, you know, in the next few months. So I would expect the same thing to happen this year as well. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when new videos pop up, so you can see more videos like this. And I have lots more holiday items to share with you. Now, onto my thoughts about this highlighter. I actually really enjoy this highlighter. My original thoughts from the first video, they have not changed. I really like it. However, I have had more time to play around with this highlighter and I've used several different brushes and styles of brushes. I've used buffing brushes. You saw me use the Sonia G Mini Cheek. I've tried fan brushes. I have tried blush brushes and highlight brushes and so forth. So I've really kind of explored the depths of using this product dry. I have not used it wet. I have to say that you could potentially apply this wet to get it a little bit brighter. But for the most part, I don't think this is going to be a blinding highlight for anybody. I would say that this is going to give you a light to medium glow. As for the actual color, its swatch is very dark, but I don't think it goes on too dark unless you really kind of buff that into your skin. And I think in that case, if you have a deeper skin tone, I think it would actually look beautiful, kind of buffed into the cheeks as, you know, like a highlighting blush even, because there is that little bit of pigment there. So if you apply it more deeply, I think it could work as a light, subtle blush. Well, I guess it wouldn't be that subtle then because it would be pretty sparkly, but I think that would be a really nice way to apply this as well, so you don't have to use it solely as a highlighter. Now today I have it buffed into my cheek with the blush on top, and I actually really like the effect. So I've been playing around with this process a lot since I started using the Wayne Goss blush duos, and he recommended applying the highlighter underneath. Now I have to say, I think using his blush products, the way he has that highlighter formulated and the blush formulated, the two of them work really well together to do that, and you're really seeing a lot of that highlighter and the undertones of that kind of peek through the blush. Whereas with a highlighter and a blush from other lines, I've noticed that you get a really nice illuminating quality. You might see a little bit of the highlight color, but it's not going to be the same. So that is a difference there. Regardless, I still think it looks really nice buffed underneath blush to give it a little bit more illumination, and I still get a little of that rose gold peeking through as well. I would love to know what your thoughts are on these, and if you have any questions or comments, please be sure to leave them down below. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. So have a great day and stay safe and healthy.